Hey, it's Damon, and I want to extend a special invitation for you to join me and Sarah and Louise of the Adoption, the Making of Me podcast for a live event here in Washington, D.C. on the weekend of Friday, September 12th. Starting Friday night, Crystal Park will screen her powerful documentary, Because She's Adopted. Midday on Saturday, I will MC a great day of events. We will begin midday with Susan Kyo Ito's one-woman performance of The Ice Cream Gene, followed by a live recording of Adoption, the Making of Me with Sarah and Louise. You're going to see Gabrielle Glasser, the author of American Baby, A.M. Holmes, author of The Mistress's Daughter, Greg Luce, who runs the Adoptee Rights Law Center, Ken DeStefano, author of I Will See You Again, Hearts Will Sing, Monica Hall, author of Practically Still a Virgin, and Sandy Morgan Caesar of the Transnational Adoptee Support Group. To close out the day, you'll see the moving one-woman performance of Unmothered by Dr. Liz DeBetta. By then, my next book, looking inside the adoptee experience, will be out, so I look forward to sharing that with you too. So go to Eventbrite online and search for Adoption, the Making of Me, or the acronym ATMOM. The in-person adoptee community is a special gathering you won't want to miss. I know my voice has been in your ear for years, so I hope you'll come to meet me and the rest of our community members live and in person in Washington, D.C. in September.
I was deeply hurt. I was mad at her and I was mad at God. Because I can't tell you the number of prayers. When I was living at Myrtle Beach, I attempted suicide. I was so depressed over my race. There were so many people questioning who I was. I couldn't answer it. I couldn't sleep. And Mom knew how bad I felt, but she still didn't share that with me.
Who am I?
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 This is Who Am I, Really? A podcast about adoptees that have located and connected with their biological family members. I'm Damon Davis, and you're about to meet Sean, who called me from Fishers, Indiana. Sean grew up the only person of color in his entire rural town, yet his ethnicity was hidden from him by his adoptive mother. In reunion, Sean finally met his birth mother, but realized he needed to establish a special boundary with her to protect his adopted children. Lacking mirroring all his life, Sean finally heard one of his paternal relatives say he looks just like someone special in their family. Sean's book is called Born Without a Race. This is Sean's journey. Sean grew up in the rural town of Alexandria, Indiana. After 10 years of marriage in the early 1960s, his adoptive parents hadn't conceived a child, and their aspiration was to live on a farm with cattle, so they adopted Sean's older brother and himself. I asked Sean about how life was growing up on the farm.
It was not particularly good.
Really? Say more. What was not so great about it?
You have to understand where I came from. So I'll go back to why I was put up for adoption. My birth mother graduated from a teaching college nearby in '62, and she was working on her master's and teaching at a nearby school. But during the break, she would go back to her hometown and she would be an assistant teacher for a mental health facility. And while she was living in the college town, she was having a on and off relationship with a woman that she'd met there at the drive-in, and they were good friends and a little bit more. And when she went back to their hometown, she'd met a guy, a black guy who was working there too, not a patient, but he was working there, and they had an affair. So she had two affairs going on at once.
One male, one female.
Right.
Gotcha.
So she became pregnant, and he was already married and had 3 kids and one on the way. So he didn't want anything to do with me. And her parents were very strict Christians, white, German, Irish. So she wasn't even afraid to even say that she was pregnant to them, let alone to a biracial baby. So she went back to the college town, and the woman that she was dating back then took her in and moved her into the house with her parents, and they took care of her. and they drove her to the and yeah, she drove her to the hospital when she delivered me. So they were friends all this time, and they remained friends, and were friends right up until that woman died just 9 months ago. So
Wow.
they were a couple that long. But so I was very different from the people in my town and the people in my family. When I was born, I was very sickly. I had inherited a lot of genetic disorders from my father, but my parents knew nothing about that and nothing on about how to take care of it. I had three surgeries by the time I was three, one for intestinal blockage, one for hernias, and one for my tongue wouldn't move.
Mm.
And then they got that, so the immediate threat was over. Then they had to deal with my asthma. And growing up, they were baling hay and dad heated with wood. So they were triggering my asthma horribly, and I was bad. And
Oh,
to mom's credit, she took me to the best asthma doctor that she knew, that anyone in the state, and he was downtown Indianapolis. But the problem was mom was afraid of elevators. So as at 3 years old, she's taking me up 7 flights of steps to see this doctor. And by the
with
time
that.
my asthma's so bad that by the time I get to him, he puts me in the hospital. So
Oh
I,
my goodness.
I spend a
Wow.
lot of time in an oxygen tent, and mom and dad, they have no medical background of what that's like. And when I come out of the oxygen tent, I was not very well behaved. And she took me back to the doctor, and he said, "Well, at least you got him here before he was a total brat." And
Oh
she
my
says,
goodness.
"Well, I'm afraid to spank him. If I spank him, he starts coughing and then he starts wheezing and he goes into an asthma attack." And the doctor said, "He's not going to die of an asthma attack. If he needs a beating, you give him a beating."
Oh my goodness. Wow.
So,
Doctor
so
granted permission, huh?
yes. So from
Uh,
that day forward, spare the rod and spoil the child. That was mom and dad's mission statement for me.
real.
But 3 days after my third birthday, mom had finally got pregnant and had delivered a boy. So he
Mhm.
was the golden child. He was not allowed to be spanked. He was not allowed to do the hard labor. So the two
Wow.
adopted boys were doing that. And my older brother took most of the beatings. I came in second. And even just a few years ago, my younger brother said, "No, dad hardly ever hit me." It wasn't
Mhm.
because we were being bad. It was just because he would be mad at the situation and just haul off and smack us just because we were there.
Really? Wow. Let
So
me
that
take
was
you
all.
back for a moment there. You hit on a
Sure.
couple of things. One, you alluded to ethnicity
Hmm.
and your birth father's ethnicity being black
Right.
and, and of African descent. Your birth mother sounds like she was white.
Right.
And that what you didn't explicitly say was you said me in my town. What I heard from that was you as a brown child in a predominantly white town. Is that correct?
It was more than predominantly white. It was 100% white.
Really?
Grandfather, my dad's dad was in the Klan. I had uncles in the Klan. I had first cousins in the Klan. The Klan marched in Independence Day parades in the 1970s. On the other side of town, there was a sign that says, "Get your black ass out of town before sundown." That was posted in the 70s. So here
And
I
how
am, a mixed race kid growing up in that.
and did you but you're a mixed race child in a white family. And what tends sometimes happens with a child is they adopt the qualities or are given the qualities of the community that they're in. And I'm wondering, I'm not sure how best to pose this question. How black did you feel?
None. Mom made up a story. She said that while I was in the hospital with all those illnesses, the doctor gave me medication that made my hair curl and darkened my skin. So she said I was born white.
Is that right?
And that story went along to anybody, all the relatives. Sean was really born white. He just looks that way because he was given medication.
And did
So,
you
yeah,
look in the mirror? What did you look in the mirror and see? Because as a child, you don't necessarily know what the truth is. You kind of have to go with what you're told. But
right.
I would imagine as you looked around, you kind of looked around and said, I don't really see how I could have been born like these people. Like, to tell me how it was for you as a kid to have any level of ethnic identity versus what you saw around you?
I had none. Mom always told me I was the ugliest kid that she had ever seen. They had the adoption story. Dad's version was the doctor showed him a whole room full of babies and he picked me. That's how I was told I was adopted, and that's as long as I can remember. Mom said she found me in a garden laying there, and I was the ugliest thing she'd ever seen. So she had pity on me and took me home.
Oh my goodness.
So,
Wow.
so I had no self-confidence, no identity of any kind of race. And that became a problem when I went to school. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know why I'm treated that way. I think it's because I'm ugly. And it didn't really dawn on me until, 50 years later when I had absolute proof that my father was black, that all these things that had happened throughout my whole life, childhood and adulthood, were racist. I
Yeah.
didn't get that.
Yeah. Yeah. How could you, right? If you're living in it
Right.
and there's nobody else around to talk to either. You can't turn to another brother and be like, "Hey man, is this happening to you?" You know what I'm
No.
saying? You're by yourself. There's no frame of reference for you. So one,
Right.
I could see that being a huge issue. I guess the other thing I wanted to ask about, Sean, was you talked a little bit about this spare the rod, spoil the child, that basically the doctor gave open permission for this asthmatic, ugly boy to start getting beatings. And
Yeah.
so I'm curious, it sounded like what you were saying was that the floodgates opened, that something that had been held back for a long time was now coming full force.
Right.
And is
That
that, did you feel like that it was because you were adopted and not hers? Because when the birth child came along, you said that kid, your brother, did not get beaten. So
right.
what was your thinking around that?
At the time, yeah, it was me and the older brother that got the beatings, and the older brother got beating the worst, being the oldest, and he moved out when he was 17. He had
Mhm.
enough.
Yeah.
It was focused on me. The last time dad really hit me in the head, I was 17. He
Mhm.
was trying to back a trailer, a horse trailer, into a spot, and I was supposed to be giving him directions, and he didn't like the directions I was given. So he came out and grabbed my head and started beating on me. And I
Mhm.
knocked him down. At that point, I was stronger than he was. And that was the last time he beat me. But I was 17.
So all up until that time. Wow. That
Right.
is crazy. And so you also said that you were engaged in the manual labor, but that when your younger brother came along, he got none of that.
Oh, he got some. It
Mm.
wasn't as much as what the older brother did. And then I could only work for so long before my asthma would take over. I could bale hay, but I couldn't go in the barn where the dust was. I could shovel manure. The best thing I did was splitting wood. So dad heated the house with wood. And I was good at that because I was more out in the fresh air and swinging axes and stuff. So I did most of that. But when after I went to college, dad sold the horses, dad sold the house, the cows. He put in a furnace. And then the younger brother didn't have to do that kind of work when he was the only one that left.
Ah, I see. Gotcha. Some modernization came through and put him on easy street, it sounds like.
Right.
Yeah, wow. Gotcha. So tell me about what your relationship was like with your adopted brother, your adopted mother, and your adopted father.
I was afraid of father. Mother was all I had. That was all I knew. And my older brother, I thought he was the greatest. I mean, that's just what I was around. The younger brother and I, we wrestled and fought a lot, but
Mm.
it wasn't that bad. I mean, we still got along. Pretty soon we could tell the difference because my two brothers are 6'2", 140, and I'm 5'7", 180.
No.
So I felt inferior to them too, just because of our physical differences.
And I would imagine those physical differences also played into your mother's comments too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which I didn't realize that. I honestly believe that my mom believed the stories that she made up
Mhm.
until way into adulthood that I realized, no, these are lies.
But the lies about you being in the field are pretty obvious. But how I'm wondering about this sort of you were ugliest little baby I ever saw comments. Did you feel like those had resonance? Were they, did you feel like those were at all her real feelings? Wow.
Yeah, she would say that to other people. She wasn't just playing with me.
I see. This wasn't a playful story of I found you in a field and you were an ugly baby, but really in her heart, she thought you were cute. She
Right,
genuinely was saying these things.
right.
Wow.
I wasn't blonde-haired, blue-eyed, tall and thin. I was an ugly, sickly, waily little baby.
Understood.
And
Tell me.
much after she died, one of the cousins said that they'd even tried to return me. Once my hair grew in and they could definitely tell that I was black, they tried to they looked into returning me. There was no option there, but they looked into it. But
Wow.
one of my older cousins, she's 8 years older than me, and she was old enough to remember that conversation. She said, "I don't want you to take Sean back."
What did you think when you heard that story?
I thought, "Oh my gosh, this is when I'm understanding that there are so many things that were just wrong, just racist, just bigoted about
Mm.
my upbringing."
Yeah. Wow. Really fascinating, huh? Well, I'm sorry you had to endure that. That's really crazy. Maybe you could just tell me one more level of it, which is how it was at school.
I went to Catholic school. Mom was Catholic. At school, up until 8th grade, it was fine because all the families knew each other. It was a very close-knit community, but we had to ride the public bus there. And the public bus kids, they just were merciless. I get flipped, I get kicked, I get tripped, elbowed, called names. And my older brother, he tried to protect me, and I was too small to fight. I was too weak to fight, and he would fight for me. He would fight on his own too. He just liked to fight,
Mhm.
but I mean, that's what it was. And it was the bus ride was horrible. Eventually, my when my older brother went to high school and I was the only one left, or I was the oldest one on the bus, I just started riding my bike to school. It was like a 2 mile ride. I would ride in the cold weather or the warm weather, and I would ride the bus as a last resort. Then, as soon as I went to high school, mom got a job at the Catholic school and she drove the youngest son to school every day.
And you rode with them?
No, at that point, I was in high school. I was in a different school.
Oh, I see. You were in high school and she would
Yeah,
drive him to school, but she wouldn't offer to drive you.
no,
And she knew you were being bullied.
yes. So she just said, "Oh, just ignore them, sticks and stones." And her favorite saying was, "Don't wear your feelings on your sleeve. They're only picking on you because they can get a reaction from you. They can make you cry. Don't cry, and they'll
Mm,
stop." They didn't stop.
yeah. Wow. Let me pause you and ask you, what would you say to a young person who is going through something like that right now?
It depends on what is my position in it. I mean, if it's
You are just an adult who has fortunately survived and lived through that level of bullying where you were the true minority, the sole representative of your ethnicity, and you have made it to adulthood out of that situation. What do you say to somebody who is going through that right now?
I would try to offer to help. So later on, I adopted biracial kids, and I thought it would be better. They started dealing with the bullying too. So we took them off the bus. I talked to the school about it. I advocated for them as best as I could, but it just wasn't working. I tried to move them to schools. I tried to move them to the Fisher School, which is a much more desirable, and but in the end, I couldn't. They wouldn't let me transfer out of my school district. So I guess I would tell them, let's work on it. I will help you try to figure out a way out of that situation. Let's see if we can change schools, definitely get you off the bus, get
Mhm.
you a different program, make the school aware
Yeah.
of what's going on.
What I'm
Um,
hearing you say is you're not going to change the situation. So let's alter situations. Let's move
right.
to a new
Let's
situation.
move out of here.
Yeah.
But the bullying with my kids didn't start until middle school because, when kids are little, they all get along fine. But
Yeah.
then the attitude started to change. So they'd already been in the school system for 5, 6 years, counting preschool and kindergarten. So they had their friends, they knew the teachers, they didn't want to move.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we
Yeah. That's very tough. That's very tough. And there's no guarantee that transplanting a child from one situation to another is going to be any better, right?
You're right. You're right.
Because you've
Um,
got new kid syndrome, right? The child who has not grown up with all the kids who are native to this natural progression through the school systems where they sort of matriculate together and graduate up to the next level, and then they all get to be part of a new friend group. When you get dumped in as the single, or you and your sibling into a entire school full of people who know each other,
Yeah.
like, you might not necessarily have created a better situation either. So I hear where you're
Right.
coming from. Wow.
If I could, I would be a friend of that person, maybe a big brother kind of situation. Think
Mhm.
of the different events if I could, if I was like the uncle of that person, just depending on the situation.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm sorry you had to go through that. It's not just about being bullied. It's also about being, as I said, the lone representative of your ethnicity in the entire town.
Right,
I want to make sure people hear that, because it's not often in our lives when you can walk into any singular situation and be the only person that represents you. You can walk into a women's meeting and be one of maybe two men, three men, or vice
right,
versa. You can walk into a meeting of any kind of association, and it may be predominantly Asian, African American, whatever, but there will be other ethnicities there. There will be Latinos and white folks and other stuff. But it's
right.
very rare that you will walk into a situation and find that you are singularly the only person that represents the things that you represent. And that had to have been incredibly tough.
Yeah, it was things that I realized as an adult, like when I was a teenager, police would pull me over when I was driving. I wasn't doing anything wrong. And they're just pulling me over, just running my license. And if I had known I was black, I would have been taught this is what happens to you.
Yeah.
You know,
Driving while black.
I'm shopping in a store and the store detectives follow me around. I had one of them that wanted me to empty my pockets because I carried an inhaler for my asthma, and
Mhm.
he wanted to see that what was in my pocket. And I told him it's medicine, and he still thought that I'd stolen it from the schools from the store.
Wow. Unreal.
So, yeah, and I didn't know why that was happening.
So, what was your first inkling of wanting to try to find or re-identify your birth family? Where were you in your life, and what was that feeling for you?
Mom always said, "You can find them when I'm dead." And my older brother went along with that, so I went along with that. When I got to college, Indiana University, I met people of different backgrounds for the first time. And in those years, there was a protest movement for the Black students against the university's investments in the South African government and businesses. So they have their little shanty town set up in Dunmeadow, and that they still do things like that to protest. Now it's the Israelis' treatment of the Palestinians.
Mm.
But I would walk there and I thought, this is not my impression of the black people that I got growing up. And in my dormitory, they had 3 levels. There's 60 kids in there. And all of us that were darker skinned, we were all in a cluster. There's 4 of us in a suite and one across the hall. And those guys were great. These people are awesome. And I'm starting to think, maybe I was misled. And people of Middle Eastern descent, they would ask me if I was Israeli, or they would ask me if I was Egyptian, if I was Pakistani, if I was Native American. I was meeting all these new people who didn't know my family, and they're all asking me, and I'm all explaining to them that first semester, well, I'm adopted. I don't know what I am. So then they'd all sit down and guess. And,
Wow.
and then
Hmm.
I would wonder about that. Okay, am I really Jewish? Should I be eating bacon? Am I Muslim? So that was the first inklings. I went home that Christmas break and told mom about my experiences and said, "Can I see my adoption papers? I want to see if it lists my race." And she said, "What do you want to see that for?" And I told her people were guessing me races, and she repeated her story. And I'm 19 at this point, and she said, "No, you were born white. Your hair was straight. Your medications made you look this way." So I wasn't getting anywhere with her, but she did say, "You're smart." This is a story she made up because I was first in my class and I was a distant first in my class. I mean,
Really?
the high school was
Brains.
extremely easy for me. And when her biological son came there 3 years behind me, the teachers were expecting similar from him. And he was nowhere near on the scale. And
Mhm.
so she told people that one of my parents was a rocket scientist and one was a brain surgeon. So it's not fair. Sean had advantages that my son doesn't. So that was the first time I
Wow.
heard that story. When I came back, that's from college, the first semester. That's when she told me that for the first time. Well, one of your parents was a rocket scientist and one was a brain surgeon. So I thought, huh. So I thought, well, I was born in a college town. So if a rocket scientist and a brain surgeon hooked up, I'm still believing mom stories.
Yeah.
It would have been his undergrad. Maybe they said that's what they were studying to be. So I went down into the basement of the library and looked through the archives at birth announcements and yearbooks and things like that, trying to find a familiar face. So that was the first effort I made. And this is 1982, 1983. So
And
there's
this
no
is
internet.
at Indiana University. You're in the Indiana archives
This is at Ball State University. I was born
at
at Ball
Ball
State
State.
Hospital.
Oh, I see. So you went to Ball State knowing that you were born there and hoped
Right,
to find
right,
something in the archives that would look familiar to you.
right. And I didn't find anything. I went back to school and the same thing started happening. People were asking me. My best subject was German. And my associate instructor in German said, "Hey, are your family German? You're so good at this." I don't know, I'm adopted. And he says, "I
Hmm.
bet you are. Have you ever been to Germany?" He said, "I can arrange for you to go." I said, "I don't have any money. Parents won't pay for that." And he says, "Well, you can go and study for a semester, for a month in Berlin with a group from Finland and a group from one of the regional campuses.
Hmm.
And then you work in an industrial chemistry plant at Bayer to pay it off. So it doesn't cost anything." So that was the first time I decided I'm going to run away and start looking and see what my ethnicity is.
Well,
And when I got to Berlin, I'm thinking, okay, this is it. I'm German. This is great.
really, it felt like home.
It felt comfortable. The first week, a lot of the people there, we were all underage in the United States, but we were drinking age in Germany. So, we were drinking, having a good time. And there was a group of us that walked across this pedestrian plaza, and there was some punks there with, black leather and spikes and mohawks, and they were skateboarding. And one of the people in the group made an ugly comment in English, and they understood English. And they came after us. All of them came after the guys in the group. But one of them that came after me said, "Are you Turkish?" And he asked it in German. And I answered in German because I didn't know how to explain I'm adopted. I don't know.
Right.
So he said, "Cool." And then he left me alone and he went to beat on some of the other Americans in the group. So I'm thinking, maybe I'm Turkish.
Oh my
So
gosh.
for the rest of the summer, I pretended like I was Turkish. And when I got to the part where the chemical plant, the foreman asked, "What are you?" And I said, "I'm Turkish." And I didn't understand Turkish were the lowest level of migrant workers in Germany at the time. So I was given all the nastiest jobs, all the dirtiest jobs. I was bullied worse, the worst shifts. I'd work at night and during the day I had off. So I'd be out in the sun and I never got a haircut in Germany. So I had the full Dr. J afro by the end of the summer, and I was dark and I looked much more black than I looked Turkish then. So then I started getting harassed by them for being black again.
Wow.
One of the workers, I was working on a scaffolding, doing something to one of the instruments, and he rammed it with a fork truck and knocked me down. And he called me something, and I don't remember the word. I never heard it before, but another worker said that was the German equivalent of the N word.
The racial
So
slur. Yeah.
it was a racial slur. So they dismissed me after that. And I don't know what happened to him. But now I've gone from being Turkish to being black, to being German to Turkish to black on my summer of discovery. So I was more confused than ever. So
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just thinking is that you, Sean, are this young guy who have decided to go on this voyage of discovery, and your professor has suggested one thing and it feels comfortable, so you go for it. Now you're in Germany. You find yourselves in trouble, and this kid who's about to give you a beat down basically asks you, "Are you this one ethnicity, Turkish?" And it's about to save you, so you go for it. Now you're Turkish. And
yeah,
then that thing that saved you, which would presumably be a good thing because you didn't get your ass kicked, now you're going to hold on to that and you take it to the job market, and the job market's, oh, that puts you way down here.
right.
So the reason I recount that whole timeline of your identity struggle is that for an adoptee, not having your identity puts you on this conveyor belt of trying to find identity versus if you already knew what your ethnicity was, you could have stood strong in every one of those situations and there would have been none of this
Right.
transitioning from one thing to the next, taking what someone basically is handing you and saying,
Right.
all right, I'll try that on, right? Let me put this mask on and see if it fits. And so just this, I'm just trying to identify that by being an adoptee and not having your ethnicity to identify with and cling to, you therefore couldn't stand up as a person in any situation and identify yourself in any situation. You had to take what was given to you, and most of the times it didn't fit.
Right.
Wow.
For the rest of Sean's time in college, he kept trying on different masks of identity, all the while still thinking he might be German. When he graduated, he moved back to an area outside of Chicago, but it was rural, just like his hometown, so he didn't fit in there, prompting another move to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. It was 1991, and there at the beach, when people waded out into the water, they sometimes lost their glasses. And Sean was working at the only 1 hour eyewear shop around, so vacationers had to replace their spectacles with him.
So it was a nice job, but it's the first time I had really lived in a predominantly black state. The tourist-
Carolina.
Right. Once the tourist season was over, they moved me inland. And during my time at the beach, I ran on the beach every day, and the light was bothering me. So I ordered some amber colored contacts. So that turned my blue eyes hazel. And I was black for all intents and purposes. When I moved inland to Columbia, I was black. So I had to learn how to be a black man really fast. The receptionist, the receptionist there, she was black, and she was the first to identify really that I was mixed. And she took me aside and was explaining to me. Said, and she was just fascinated by the fact that I didn't know that. It's like, how do you not know you're black? I said, this is what I was told. So we started dating, and
I did
very
not expect you to say that.
that I am not, I didn't date all through high school or college. I saw myself as ugly. I just didn't want rejections, but she saw me as very smart. And so we started dating. But as time wore on, they were working me 6, 7 days a week. I was no longer on the beach. So my tan faded. And the first time she saw me without my amber contacts in, she's going, whoa, are you really black? And then she came, I still had my apartment at the beach. And when she saw pictures of my parents there and my family, she says, you're going to have to prove to me what you are. So
Wow.
that was the next time I went home. And I confronted mom. I said, I really want to see my adoption papers. I want to see what race I am. And she goes, well, I've already told you. I said, well, this girl I'm dating wants to know. She said, I thought you were dating a law student. And I said, yes, and she's black. And mom gritted her teeth and said, well, how black is she? I said, Mom, I don't know how to answer that, Mom. She's black. And mom said, well, is she like that Miss America that posed nude that's so light that you couldn't tell, or is she the other kind? That's how mom phrased it. And I thought about it. I thought, no, she doesn't look like Vanessa Williams. She looks more like Oprah. So more that shade. So the mom stomped off. She was really mad. And she brought one page of my adoption papers. And this one showed that my birth mother was 23 and white. It didn't have any names. And on the father's side, it was completely blank. So I said, well, how do you know? That my father's not black. It doesn't say anything here. She said, well, they would have told me. I said, well, it doesn't say. How would they know if it doesn't say? How would they know that he was black? She goes, well, he wouldn't be a rocket scientist or a brain surgeon if he was black.
Oh my gosh.
That's
Wow.
my environment moving. So,
Wow.
yeah, so I went back and told my girlfriend that. She laughed in my face. Like, you tell you, this is my mom. That's a lie. She says, where is a rocket scientist and a brain surgeon going to meet in Muncie, Indiana and hook up? And why would they give their baby to a couple crackers like your parents?
She went all in.
She went all in. So We stayed together for another 6 months. So then we had a horrible breakup, and I was tired of being moved around. The company I worked for, I was really good at my job, so they moved me to the busiest office, and I did a good job there. But a white graduate from UAB, she'd been a cheerleader at Auburn. She caught the attention of the owner, and she decided if she was going to work for him, she wanted my office. So he hired her for about 25% more than I was making after being there 2 years. And then they
Wow.
moved me to another office and kept shuffling me around. So I
Mm,
thought, no, I'm good, because they would move me to wherever they had problem patients, because I would figure out what was wrong with them, whether it was
mm.
medical or refractive or contact lenses. I could figure it out when their other doctors couldn't. I thought, I'm just going to go back to Fishers, Indiana. My mom was a Fisher, so that's where the connection comes with this community. And I'm just going to open up my own practice and do it for myself.
Wow. Your mom was connected to the lineage of the town you grew up in, which is, as you've
Well,
accounted.
she was connected to the lineage of the town I work in. Dad was connected to the lineage of the town I grew up in. So the main street in that town has our same last name.
Wow, unreal.
So yeah,
Interesting.
they were in this area for generations.
So what happens next on your quest for identity and trying to find your biological relatives? Where are you in your life and what do you do to try to start to get the search going?
I had given up on the search. I
Mm,
thought, I'm a survivor, no matter what it is, I can't figure this situation out. So I just move on and with my life and just forget about it. Eventually, one of my patients was a priest, and he had been diagnosed with cancer. And I was talking to him about in regards of how that affects his eyes and how he saw it overall. And he said, cancer's a blessing. He said, God gives us things. And this diagnosis is something that I've used to serve God's greater good. He said,
mm,
I knew that I had so many years left. I didn't have an infinite number of years. So I got super focused on what I wanted to accomplish in the 5 to 7 years the doctors gave me. So he got a grant from Eli Lilly, traveled to Europe and became very fluent in Spanish and studied building techniques, then
mm.
came back and took church groups to Haiti and Mexico to build houses. So I
Wow.
thought, wow. So our suffering is a gift and we're supposed to use it. So that really struck with me. And at that point, I had married my wife, still now. She's white. And she said, well, if that's the case, maybe your adoption struggle was a gift and you're supposed to use it somehow. So we decided that we would become parents of biracial children. So we went to Catholic Charities and went through the paperwork and the home study and the training, and we became adoptive parents. So I thought, I'm going to do it better. I'm going to do it the right way.
All right.
So
Especially given your experience as a adopted child of biracial ethnicity and given all of the negative experiences that you had, you would think to yourself, I got to be able to do this
right.
better than they did, right?
If not me, who could possibly do it better?
Right.
And
Who
birth mothers get to pick the parents of their children. So then they thought it was the same way. There was no waiting period for me. It was like, okay,
Mhm.
biracial baby, here you go.
Got you. Got you. Got you.
So
So how
yeah, I forgot about, this is good. I forgot about finding my own. That was just completely off the table. But
Mhm,
we kept in contact with our children's biological parents. So my
mhm.
son had met his father and his mother. It was just before they were one.
Uh-huh.
And then my daughter had met her grandmother and her mother again by the time they were one. Then the birth parents kind of lost interest, but we continued to send them pictures and updates out of respect to the birth parents of how the kids were doing. Skip forward to when my daughter was 12. We're watching the local news and they're covering an apartment fire on the south side of Indianapolis and they're interviewing my daughter's birth mother. So we hadn't seen her for 10 years. And
Wow.
that put my daughter into a depression because she'd seen pictures of her. She knew who she was. And she just went off the rails. She was at an emotional time anyway for girls. And so she started having behavioral problems, and we started going through the adoption agency. All of our communications were through the adoption agency. So we started asking for a visit, and the birth mother kept saying no. Finally, after more than a year of asking, the grandmother, the birth mother's mother, said, I will meet you. So we arranged a meeting at the adoption agency with the grandmother. And when we got there, the mother did show up. And it was very emotional. That was the first reunion I'd witnessed. And to see the look on the birth mother's face when they hugged and realized how healthy her and happy the daughter that she allowed us to raise was developing. And it really took a load off her. Then for the first time, I saw it from the birth mother's perspective. And I thought, uh-oh, maybe my birth mother's still out there. I should let her know I'm okay. Maybe she's carrying this guilt with her. At this point, I'm 53, 54 years old. She would be at that point 75. I said, I need to get on this.
Yeah.
So I went back to my adoptive mother again, asked her again to see the paper. At this point, her health was fading, and my wife and her had a really good relationship, and my wife was there, and she was more or less the one that asked. She said, I want to compare his papers to our kids' papers and see how they're the same and how they're different. So mom brought out the full envelope with all the documents that she's had in her bedroom for 55 years.
And your
And I
wife asks for it one time and gets it.
boom, yeah, just like that. So I
Wow.
pull out a stack of mimeograph sheets and I'm looking through it, and I've got my brother's forms. I pulled that out first, and I'm looking at the name. I said, it's got her names. It's got both parents' names on here. And I just pull out my phone and Google it. And within seconds, I'm looking at their obituaries. And mom
Wow.
said, "Well, they can't be dead yet. And they're younger than me." Well, that really made me mad. I said, Mom, the cemetery has lots and lots of people who were born after you. Okay.
Right.
They're dead. There's their obituary.
Mm.
And while I'm having this exchange with mom, my wife's over there taking pictures of my certificates, and it has my birth mother's name on it.
Oh, wow.
All this
Mm.
time, mom had it, and she wouldn't let me see it. But
Mm.
her health was fading. She actually died about 9 months after that, and she had been in and out of the
Oh.
hospital. So, I mean, she'd always said, "You can see it after I'm dead." I think she knew that the end was getting near.
How did you
So
feel knowing this, that you had asked to sound like 3 times, and she always gave you stories and lies, but she had all the information you had ever wanted? And then, so 1, how did you feel that she denied you that after repetitive asks? And 2, how did you feel when your wife asked for it 1 time and got it immediately?
I hadn't really thought of it that my wife got it on the first try. I was hurt. I was deeply hurt. I was mad at her and I was mad at God because I can't tell you the number of prayers. I mean, when I was living at Myrtle Beach, I attempted suicide. I was so depressed over
Really?
my race. There were so many people questioning who I was. I couldn't answer it. I couldn't sleep. And mom knew how bad I felt, but she still didn't share that with me. And God didn't make her. It was right there in an envelope. All she had to do was open it.
Mm.
So
Mm.
my wife had took the pictures and she took the ball from there because she was working from home and I was working in the office. And she found my birth mother within about a week.
Wow.
She was a retired professor from that same college. Had been by her house dozens, if not hundreds of times. And she was alive and well. And my wife is a pretty good researcher. She couldn't find any husband, any kids, because I thought if she's married and moved on and I might cause damage to her life, I'm not going to contact her. But we found nothing. So we drove by her house and I actually saw it was late in the night, about dusk, and I saw her walk across the picture window. And I went into a full asthma attack. And I was there. She
Really?
is. Yeah.
My gosh.
And my wife kind of thought I'd be done there because she has a lot of respect for my adoptive mom, and she, being an adoptive mom herself, she can understand how that would be hurtful if I liked my birth mother better. But I wrote her a letter and asked her, explained who I was, where I was, what I'd been doing. and just wanted to let her know I was fine and I appreciated the decision she made. And if she wanted to contact me, I gave her my cell phone number, and
Mm.
she called me that week.
Wow. How did you deliver that to her? You said you wrote
Just
it on
mail. It
you
was a
wrote it
mail.
in the mail? Wow. And so she
Uh,
called you that week. How was that call?
the first time I was at a concert with my mother, with my daughter at the middle school, so I didn't answer it, and I
Yeah.
called her back, and it was the week before Mother's Day, and we talked about that, and it was very emotional. We didn't talk long, but we knew we wanted to meet each other, and she says, "Not this weekend." She says, "I do not deserve a visit on Mother's Day." Anytime after that. So we met the weekend after Mother's Day, and yeah, the first meeting was more emotional than the phone call.
I can imagine. So how tell me set up this first meeting. Where did you go? And tell me about your feelings going into this meeting before you even see her.
Again, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, very nervous. I met her, I went to her house, and I drove. She was at the end of a cul-de-sac, so she saw me coming, and her wife who became her wife, were there. And oh man, it was a hug like none I'd ever had. She was very glad to see me and told
Really?
me how much I look like my father. And then her wife gave me a hug, and she says, "Yeah, I've known about you all these times. It's so good to meet you. I actually was with your mother when you were born." Wow. So,
Unreal. Wow.
and that was about all she said. And she left, and my wife had prepared a scrapbook for me to take. So it had all the pictures of me growing up, baby pictures, school pictures, high school graduation, college graduation, right up until my wedding day. And then she ended the scrapbook there. And later on, she made one of our lives together with the kids and everything. And my birth mother had pictures of her going through her career. She was an elementary education professor at Ball State. So she was not a rocket scientist. She did
Wow.
not want to tell me who my father was. She said, because she said, "I know, but I respect his privacy." I said, "That's okay. That's fine." I said, "Well, can you answer one thing for me? My adoptive mother told me that he was a brain surgeon. Was that true?" She goes, "Almost. He was a barber." So he had sharp instruments around the head, but no, he didn't penetrate.
Oh
So,
my goodness. Wow.
and she
Mm.
wanted to know what happens next. And I said, "Is this a one only, or are we going to continue a relationship?" And I said, "Well, I think we'll continue a relationship."
That's
So,
awesome. Wow.
and she's respected my boundaries. She doesn't come to my house. I will go visit her, or we'll meet somewhere.
Why is that a boundary of yours?
How can I share this? I don't want to share too much of my kids' stories, but they are missing out on their biological mothers. And my wife had that connection with my adoptive mother. So it feels awkward to them to suddenly have these two new grandmothers that are way cool and much
Yeah.
better. So she said, "Okay, she can't just pop in anytime she wants." And she's never come to the house. She comes to recitals, or when my daughter was in high school and she did color guard, she would come to that. In fact, she
Mhm.
came to one. This was after mom died, and I went and picked up my dad, so they got to meet each other. So
Wow. This is a fascinating facet of reunion that I can't say that I've really ever thought of, that you have found your biological mother and you have adoptive children who are missing out on their relationship with their biological mother. So by you being in reunion as an adoptee, it's great for you, but you also have to be extremely sensitive to how that plays out for your adoptive children and their challenges with their reunions.
thank
And
you
you
for
mentioned,
understanding.
yeah, that's a really interesting dynamic that I can't say I've ever really thought about before. Really that's a one to ponder. And then you've also talked about your wife's relationship with your adoptive mother versus this new mother that you now know.
Right.
Not to mention, there's two women. It's not just her. It's her and her wife.
Yeah.
So, wow, that's incredibly complex. Huh.
Her extended family is really small because they kind of distance themselves from my birth mother because she was end this gay relationship. So that was already set sail. And she asked them if any of them wanted to meet me because they didn't even know she had a baby. And they said, no, we don't want to meet him.
Really? What did you
So
think when you heard that?
good riddance. I don't care.
Right.
I'm a delight.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. You got to focus on your own positivity. You don't want to know me? You're out of luck.
Growing up, Sean always hated his birthday, so when his kids had birthdays, Sean and his wife went all out with a month-long celebration. Anything they wanted to do, Sean tried to make his kids feel special. One year, the musical Kinky Boots was playing at Ball State, and his daughter wanted to go. Sean's birth mother bought the tickets, special seats for his daughter, her friends, and her mom, while Sean and his birth mother sat up in the cheap seats together.
And at that point, something clicked with my birth mother. And she said, before you leave, I got something for you. So she brought out a copy of my father's obituary. Said, this is your father. And she says, I've gotten to know you and I trust you and I know that you'll make the best decision on what to do with this information. So
Wow.
he was definitely deceased. And I thought that is wonderful. I finally get a face to this. I mean, I knew in 23andMe a few years ago that he was Black, but I never saw him. And I do resemble him. And I thought that was fine. I don't want his family to know he had an affair because he stayed, I could tell from the obituary, he stayed married until their death. So they were married over 50 years with his wife at the time. And I said, that's fine. I know who he is. I've seen his face. I'm done here. He's deceased. But the obituary also noticed that he was preceded in death by his two sons. So I have two half brothers that died at age 50, and I'm 55.
Wow.
Because I know I have a lot of inherited genetic problems. I had Pfeiffer syndrome, which, if you've never heard of that, if you Google it, the first thing that pops up is that's what killed Prince's son. And so he
Killed
had
who?
Prince's son. Prince, the musician, had a son. He died as an infant because
Really? I didn't know that.
he had Pfeiffer syndrome. And I had a mild case. So that's why I had all the surgeries. The Pfeiffer syndrome wasn't a thing when I was born. I mean, it didn't have an identity, but they figured it out and where the genetic defect was. So I thought, I have these two brothers that died at 50. Do I have a ticking time bomb? Then my dilemma was, how do I find out why they died at 50 without telling my surviving brother and sister? Because I still have a brother and sister that are living, and I don't want to spoil the memory of their father. So I think I'm clever. I go to 23andMe and I look at the relatives again, which I just never paid much attention to that. But I had an uncle and 4 first cousins on my father's side. So I picked the first cousin that was closest to me in DNA match, and I messaged her and I explained who I was and what I wanted to know. And she goes, really? She says, can you prove it? I thought, well, you're on 23andMe too, so you know we're related. We're here.
You can see the
So
same signs I'm looking at.
you're seeing the same screen I am. I'm over here. So she was extremely nice. And she explained to me in detail what happened to my two brothers that died. And I said, well, thank you very much. I'm going to share this information with my doctor. And if you could, don't tell my brother and my sister that I exist. I don't want to spoil their memory. And he's like, too late.
Oh,
So
no.
she's messaging me on the computer. She got the phone over here. I'm calling my brother. Guess what?
What?
And he had, so my father had 3 boys. He was the only one left. He was excited that he had another brother.
Oh,
He said,
wow.
oh, I'm missing that. I'm missing that relationship. And I said, okay, I'm already ticking off my my adoptive mother by meeting with my birth mother. I said, let me get some time to kind of work this in and we will meet someday. That day came pretty quick. His mom died within a few weeks after that. And I messaged him and told him, and he said he'd lost his mother too. So he was very supportive, very kind. And he said, well, we'll meet, but when the time is right, there's no hurry. So I thought, fine. And that's where we left it. And we exchanged some pictures. His son had gotten married. And I sent him pictures of my kids by email. And Then following Friday, I was just going to the barber shop to get my hair cut, and I'm done and I'm getting ready to leave, and a young black man comes in, and I thought, you look familiar, but I've been in this town for 25 years. I just thought he was one of my patients. So I said hi, and he didn't react to me at all. I thought, well, that's not right. And then when he checked in, I thought, oh my God, he's my nephew. I just saw his wedding picture. So I thought,
Really?
oh, okay, Sean, what you doing now?
Dang, that's crazy.
Your nephew just
Wow.
walked past you. Are you going to let it go? And I thought, nah, there's got to be a reason God put this together. So I turned around and I introduced myself. I said, I think I know your dad. I said, has he shared any information? I said, what is your dad, Darren? I said, yeah. He goes, oh, I'm your uncle. He goes, wow, you look just like grandpa. First time in my life, someone just like out of the blue said I look like someone, and I knew that I looked like that.
Wow. That's crazy. Validation from a stranger, but the stranger is related to you. That is
Yeah.
nuts.
So I just, and this is the barbershop I've been going to, so they know me, and all the scissors are stopping. They know what I'm going through. It's, wow,
That's
this is a
crazy.
must see TV right here.
Yeah.
And then within an hour, his dad is emailing me, okay, bro, you met my son. Now we got to meet. So,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You can't delay that anymore. That's incredible.
yeah.
Really
So
cool.
we met for lunch, and then I met the entire family later on at
Uh-huh.
his house.
And how was the paternal reunions?
It was fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, my brother and his family are very welcoming. I've met my sister for lunch a few times, probably not as welcoming. I mean, she's always cordial to me, but not like my brother. He's, hey, I got an extra ticket to go to the Indy 500. You in? Or we're
Wow.
going golf. You in? I said, and I'll call him and say, hey, I got an extra break at lunchtime. He's retired now. I said, you want to go meet at Top Golf? And he says, sure.
That's
All he,
amazing.
yeah. So I'm closer to him than anybody ever in my adoptive world.
That's really incredible.
My
Wow.
son, my son met him. My wife has not, but for the same reasons. And she asked my son, "What's he like?" He said, "He's just like dad. He's just another version of dad."
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Really cool. That's
Yeah.
amazing, Sean.
So that was the paternal reunions.
Uh-huh. Very good. Wow, that's amazing. I really appreciate you taking time to share both the struggles and the triumphs. And this is one of the things, it's funny as I say this, I realize your story epitomizes what I frequently tell people. They hear I do the podcast, they ask me, are most adoptions good or bad? And I'm like, it's not black and white, right?
Right.
There are awesome adoptions and awful reunions and amazing, terrible adoptions and incredible reunions and everything in between. And you start to move the dials on race and ethnicity and socioeconomic status and geography and all this stuff. And you get all these different stories that you can't just say good or bad because there's various elements that could be considered one or the other inside of each situation, right?
Right.
That by having gone through the tribulations that you did, one could have felt very sorry for you, but then I think it was your wife that said perhaps your story is one that is meant to bring you strength and for you to journey on. And so you could argue that the struggle actually turned you into somebody potentially better than had you not struggled. I'm not saying everybody should go out and struggle because it sounded like what you went through
Yeah.
was friggin' hell. But I am saying that there can be strength from the survival of some of
Right.
these challenges. I don't wish it on anybody, but I think that there's a lot of growth for people who are able to come out on the top end of some of these situations.
Well, yeah, that's the more people I talk to and tell my story, the better I feel about it. That's during the pandemic, I was non-essential because optometry was not critical, but I had to be available for emergencies. So I came in the office anyway. And I just start sitting down and writing about the different events in my life and how knowing my race would have made a difference back then,
Mm.
knowing what my family was from. And just then I put that all into a single Word document and I sent it to some of the people that are in the story. And they said, this is good. You really need to publish it. So I cleaned it up and put it out there for a publisher. And they talked fast about money. They offered me a contract and movie rights and stuff. And I thought, I just want to tell my story. So yeah,
I'm with you.
I just put it out there. It's on Amazon now, and some people, maybe one or two people a month, will look at it and then let me know. And that gives me the satisfaction that I wanted. Somebody knows my story and appreciates it.
Yeah. Well, more people are going to know your story now. Thank you for being here. Before you go, tell me, what is the name of your book so people can go check you out?
I called it Born Without a Race, and that was by Dr. Michael Bauer, which I mentioned that would have been my name if my family would have kept me, or very close to my name. Modified it a little bit.
So your birth name would have been Michael Bauer or something close to it. And
Right.
As a doctor, that is your designation. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Sean, and I appreciate you telling your story, man. You take care, okay?
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Of course. See you.
Hey, it's me. Sean grew up literally the only person of color in an entirely white community, lied to about his identity, from the color of his skin to the kinkiness of his hair. I was so struck by some of the situations Sean found himself in. Bullied to the point of riding his bike to school alone no matter what the weather. Entering college, traveling overseas, and entering the employment pool, unaware of his ethnicity. And the repetitive denied requests to see his adoption records until his adoptive mother was near death. It really made me think when Sean said he had to put boundaries on his maternal reunion because he was empathetic to the challenges of his adoptive children's situations with their own birth mothers. For an adoptee who adopts children, we can definitely relate to the issues of our own children on a deeper level than others, and sometimes that means sacrificing for their mental health, as any good parent usually does. I'm Damon Davis, and this was the last show for this season of the Who Am I Really podcast. So I hope you found something in Sean's journey that inspired you, validates your feelings about wanting to search, or motivates you to have the strength along your journey to learn, who am I really? And don't forget to check Eventbrite for the registration information for the live podcast of Adoption, the Making of Me. Also, reminder about the upcoming book, Looking Inside the Adoptee Experience. It should be out later this summer. Take care, and I'll see you in the fall for one more season of the show. How does it feel to be adopted? What does it mean to search for your origins? Adoption is a life-altering experience for everyone involved, but for adoptees, the question of identity is never simple. It's a lifelong journey shaped by mystery, longing, and sometimes profound discoveries. I've spent the last 8 years listening to over 250 adopted people from all walks of life and around the world who share their adoption stories. People who lived through, thrived, and merely survived adoption. Many of whom dared to search for their biological roots. Some found long-lost family. Others uncovered unexpected truths. Still others found no answers at all. But all of them shared raw, unfiltered stories of resilience, identity, and self-discovery. Now, their voices come together in my new book, The Adoptee Experience. Inside the cover, you'll find what adoptees experience in their adoptive families, why so many of us feel compelled to search, and the deep emotions that drive us. How fantasies about birth parents shape our expectations before adoption reunion. The role of DNA testing, access to records, and other tools that impact adoptee searches. And the emotional roller coaster of attempting adoption reunions to reconcile the past, whether the journey brings joy, heartbreak, or something in between. The Adoptee Experience isn't just a book, it's a reflection of what it really means to be adopted. If you've ever wondered about your own identity or you want to understand the adoptee journey, this book is for you. Please take a moment to visit whoamireallypodcast.com/adoptee experience. Again, whoamireallypodcast.com/adoptee experience to stay up to date on the book's progress.